See, we have attendees starting to join. Yaron and I will begin the conversation shortly. I'll provide an introduction in about a minute, but we'll give attendees another 60 seconds to join. All right. Hi, I'm Michael Fiedel, Managing Director of InsurTech Ohio, and your moderator for today's conversation. I have the privilege of being joined by Yaron Ben-Zvi, CEO of Haven Life. Yaron, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you for even getting my last name right. So
I'm a stickler, so it feels good to have gotten off to a good start there. I wanted to stress right away that today's CEO Fireside Chat is brought to you by Reuters Events and produced in conjunction with Reuters Events, The Future of Insurance USA, which from this coming June 22nd through the 24th will bring together more than 1,000 CEOs, C-suite leaders, and high-level decision makers from across the insurance industry to talk about and continue the transformation of insurance. Before we jump in, I also want to encourage our audience to ask questions throughout today's conversation. Yaron and I might pluck a few of these as we go to discuss. Please use the Q&A box, not the chat feature on Zoom, to share your questions at any time. The Q&A box will help us tally the questions, mark whether we've answered them or not. So again, look for the Q&A box and enter any questions at any time, particularly in the context of our conversation. We might jump to one of those questions if it's relevant to what Yaron and I are talking about. We also will reserve likely the last 20 or 30 minutes to focus in on your questions. So please keep them coming. Yaron, one of the things that I love about Haven Life is that your origin story starts with your very practical and personal experience as a father, something that I, as a dad of two and an owner of a life insurance policy, can very much relate to. So I think a good place to kick off would be to let you share a little bit more about yourself and the beginnings of Haven Life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like many entrepreneurs, I really came to life insurance and to starting Haven Life based on my own experience as a customer. So you can imagine back after my wife and I have two kids, but after we had our first, my daughter, my dad tapped me on the shoulder and said, "All right, you've kind of grown up, time to get a couple things done. You got to get life insurance. You got to start the college fund." And, this was at a moment in my life where I was already kind of in the fintech sort of world. I had been working on a robo-advisor. I had lived in technology in a while, and all of that was kind of already permeating my personal life, right? So I was doing my banking online, my brokerage online. It seemed like, the obvious thing. And so I had that really expectation as a customer when I came to life insurance. And so I went online and I Googled something like online life insurance and spent a maddening series of hours trying to figure out what truly was online life insurance, and had a frustrating experience. And it took me, as it does many, a month or two to get a policy, lots of documents flying back and forth. Somebody had to come out and prick me with a needle, and really just the experience kind of lit the light bulb, if you will, and made me say, hey, look, it's not too far a jump to say that technology is going to change the life insurance industry at some point, and there's an opportunity here. And that's what led to the beginnings of Haven Life.
Love it. The past year has forced considerable change and reservations on all of us. So kind of diving right into how Haven Life has grown, particularly in the last 12 months or so, how were you and the team at Haven Life personally impacted by this transition?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been a really interesting year for so many industries. So if I step back for a second and you think about what Haven Life is and what we've really been doing, we launched almost 6 years ago, right? We're kind of a very digitally focused, very technology focused innovator in the life space. And what we're really doing is thinking about how we make life insurance simple for customers. And our customers, typically the younger, more technology focused, more digital focused parent or young family. And so we'd already spent quite a few years thinking as this agency that is very technologically driven about how to reduce friction, how to kind of meet the customer expectation. Now, what happened was, when COVID hit, a lot of those themes that we had already been thinking about and working on really just became magnified and that much more important. All of a sudden, you had, huge numbers of people who were stuck at home. And not only were they stuck at home, where they were very reasonably thinking about their mortality more than ever before, right? And so life insurance, which was something historically that's hard to get people to think about, became top of mind for people in this environment. And we happen to kind of be well positioned with a solution that, people could really do quickly at home on a PC. And we saw the benefits of that. And so, as COVID hit, we definitely saw sort of dramatic increases in kind of interest and in sales ultimately.
Talk about the growth a little bit of Haven Life. I believe 6 years old. Is that correct?
Yep. We launched 6 years ago in one state and
Okay.
are coming up on our 6th year now, and now we're national.
And how rapid has Haven Life grown? Has much of the growth been in the last couple of years? And how much has the relationship with Mass Mutual fueled that growth?
Yeah. So it's a good call out. So Haven Life is a wholly owned subsidiary of Mass Mutual. So all the policies that we sell are actually, Mass Mutual issued policies. And we've worked really closely with them to design those policies, optimize them for digital, optimize the underwriting and the pricing and all of those kinds of things. A lot of the growth that we've seen has been in the last couple of years. It's been steady, but I would say especially the last 2 years have been huge jumps. I can tell you that during COVID, when we looked at like Q1 this year, we're up probably 60% in sort of sales over last year. Similar growth kind of the year before that. And so there's been a lot the last few years, which I think is a combination of both just us obviously getting better and learning and optimizing over time. But it's also, to me, an indication of just people's sort of mind shift, right? In terms of how they want to interact with their life insurance companies and how they want to buy this product. And if you look at direct to consumer sales and some of the simple product sales relative to the broader market in the life industry, those things are, especially in the last year or two, growing dramatically and outsized pace.
I'm always very intrigued by major players throughout the insurance industries across life, health, and P&C who particularly come from non-insurance backgrounds. I'm curious for your perspective on how you see the culture and the kind of experience of the Haven Life team, which is quite large now, about 300 employees, correct?
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
How are you balancing bringing in talent with that doesn't come from, say, an insurance background with particular expertise, with the particular expertise necessary to deliver an insurance product, especially in partnership with obviously a major standing leader like Mass Mutual? How does the experience from outside the industry get blended in a way that you think is particularly effective with experience inside of the industry?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Michael. And it really is. I've always said it's kind of the mix between the two that is sort of the secret sauce and the magic, right? So you want the different perspectives, and definitely we have folks on our team that are, actuaries and kind of subject matter experts who have the years of experience in the life space and can really sort of bring the product knowledge, the regulatory knowledge, the things that you need to ultimately successfully launch a product. Just as important, though, is bringing that outside perspective. And especially we have sort of focused on in the technology space. So we've hired on a lot of people that come from other tech companies, of various industries, people who understand kind of technology and digital, and ultimately the customer experience too, so that we can think about combining the product knowledge, but in a way that is really different and starts to feel different from a go-to-market perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you look at our 300 people, probably, close to 55% or so are in that sort of technology and sort of digital, really technologist space.
Mm-hmm.
So we really kind of weigh heavily on sort of folks who understand that and understand kind of what that means to bring product to market in a different way. It's definitely a different kind of culture, right? It's and that's been a key part of what we do, is sort of really defining that culture from day
Mm-hmm.
one in terms of who we are, what our mission is, and making sure that we lean into that and take it very seriously in everything that we do.
Absolutely. I want to lean a little bit more into the consumer perspective and how you see the consideration of life insurance changing in a post-COVID world.
Yeah. So it's a great question. So one of the things, as COVID hit, we were like, I think all both agencies and carriers in the life space really wondering what was going to be the impact of this to our business. And we really didn't know. So actually, the first thing that we did, which was kind of true to us, I think, was we said, let's try to understand what the customer perspective is on this. And so we actually very quickly put out a survey to our policyholders and our prospects and said, hey, what's top of mind? What are some of the questions that you have? And what we really learned was that people in this moment, more than anything, were feeling sort of unstable and were really worried about their own financial security. And so actually in that moment, consideration of our product set was really high, because, ultimately what we do is we offer a product that is meant to serve as sort of a measure of financial security for people. We also learned really quickly, though, that people had questions about what buying life insurance would be like in the midst of a pandemic, right? So it's like, well, what do I do if I can't get a medical exam right now? Or what do I do if I have COVID? And so what that meant was, actually, I think we were very quick to putting up an FAQ on our website that really addressed a lot of people's top questions that we found. So I think probably March 13th or 14th, which, if you remember back then, was pretty much the day that everybody was going home, we were putting up a blog post talking about the questions that people were concerned about. And what that became is just a really good, I think, signal to people who were looking for this product at the time that we were kind of, customer centric, thinking about the process, thinking about how it might impact them. And it also became a signal actually to press that was interested in the topic at the time of what was it like to get life insurance in this moment. So we ended up getting a lot of really good press coverage out of that as well. But that kind of customer mindset, to kind of circle back to your question around, like, first instinct is, what are customers thinking right now, really, really paid off for us as a business.
Yeah, your company stresses balancing the human touch with technology, and I think the element of how you approach communication is a good example of an area, an opportunity that doesn't really require much technology. It really requires the foresight to think like a consumer, to answer questions that you have, that they're going to have. Are there other ways in which you feel like Haven Life is balancing the human touch alongside the technology that you're working so hard to create?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting. It's kind of the way you ask the question. It really, I think, shows that I think what we're learning more broadly in financial services, in my view, is that you really need the balance of both of those things to be successful with customers, right? Technology is really important because that's kind of how people expect to interact, but you also need human sort of a human touch for customer service and just language and how you talk to people at the end of the day. So there's a few ways that we really sort of think about it. One is certainly in our customer service. So we have invested a lot in a just I'm always sort of impressed by our customer service team in terms of how much they can sort of help people and handhold people through the process. Even though many of our customers don't reach out to them, when they do, they know there's a person there to help answer their question, get technical help, help them figure out what they need to do. The other way we've really balanced technology and human is actually through the underwriting process, I would say, right? So we're really trying to constantly sort of optimize between underwriting decisions that can be made in automated fashion to help speed things along, but where we can insert human touch and human processes to kind of complement that, to either get more people through, get them more elegantly, and ultimately make better decisions.
That's a great example. The improvements around underwriting, both in terms of efficiency and quality, is a hot button area in every facet of insurance. I'm curious actually about your thoughts on where there may be some automation in terms of the available data that you're capturing and able to use that may not require a customer to say answer a question or something or anything really along those lines. Where is data accessibility in terms of life insurance going at the moment, and how rapidly do you see it evolving into the future?
Yeah, I talk about this a lot, but if you think about even kind of pre the last 5 years, when I think digital transformation has really accelerated, the lifeblood of the life industry in many ways is data, right? We get a lot of information about customers in various ways, and we use that to make underwriting decisions. And quite honestly, I think historically, even up until several years ago, we were already getting a lot of data on customers, right? We typically get, everything they tell us about themselves in the application, motor vehicle records, prescription histories. Those are things pretty much every life insurer today is using on a fully underwritten basis, at least. So the data's out there. I think what has been more challenging is how do you use that data to create better decisions, to automate it, to integrate it into your legacy technology stack and systems, and ultimately maybe change your processes to truly make it kind of customer centric, right? So not just to kind of figure out how to make the best risk decision, but to make it in such a way where the customer is going to get a policy faster, better, easier, so forth. So that's where a lot of our focus has been, and where I think a lot of the industry can still really improve, is just using the data we already get to make things better. All that said, I do think the next horizon of data, which will help push things even forward, and I think you saw Haven Life working with MassMutual during the pandemic, and others start to use this data. I think the emergence of more ubiquitous and standard electronic health records will definitely, I think, be the next horizon of helping to push that along, so that we don't have to get parameds out to people for every case, and so I think that's kind of going to be the next frontier.
Appreciate you sharing. I want to stress to our audience, please keep the questions coming. I see that we've gotten a few already. We will absolutely be addressing every question that we can. So please keep those coming. Again, use the Q&A box, not the chat feature, to send those questions through. Yaron, the next item that I was curious for your perspective on is really around the phrase digital transformation, which can be pretty overblown and quite bloated when used without context. It's hard to define without understanding the value that one or one's company is trying to deliver by digitally transforming. So curious, what does the term digital transformation within the life insurance industry mean to you as a CEO trying to build a company, changing the game?
Yeah, ultimately, it really means two things. I think it could mean lots of different things to different people. To me, as it has to be both taking a lot of the sort of pain and, quite frankly, cost out of some of the more legacy systems and processes that are actually in place. But secondly, and maybe even more important, is it has to be, to me, done in a way that is kind of customer beneficial. And those two things together, to me, are what I mean by digital transformation. There's a lot of things that can and should be done, sort of transforming kind of core systems and improving efficiencies in general. But I think the transformation part to me really comes with, how do we think about delivering something in a slightly different way? Not just kind of automating or increasing the efficiencies of old ways. And I think that's where you start to think about, how do I reduce friction for customers? How do I sort of potentially redesign products in a different way to make the value proposition resonate more? How do I reach new customer segments? And those are ultimately where I think the industry will need to go over time.
Yeah, I think this answer touches on the one you had previously provided regarding changes in data. And you touched in both of those responses how important it is to attack the strategy of the product, the processes, and the operations. And I think it's often forgotten. I've always been a big proponent of trying to demystify that a lot of the technology changes that are occurring are really being built out of good questioning, new strategies, and conversations that really are very practical and not technical by any means. And that's where the real change stems from. The solutions themselves can become incredibly technical, whether you're using artificial intelligence or some sort of machine learning, is really the end of already understanding what you're going to deliver and why it's going to drive value. So I appreciate that perspective. It hits home for me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you lay it out that way, Michael, right? Because if you think about where we started Haven Life, it wasn't a technology question. It was, how do we reach a new kind of customer, right? Who expects a different kind of experience from their life insurance provider. It just so happened to be that in order to do that, ultimately we felt like, well, we're going to, file a different kind of product. We're going to rethink the underwriting. We're going to build our own underwriting system, and so those things just happen to drop out as necessities, which is what makes life insurance in some ways so challenging too, is that ultimately the answer to those questions, to those very customer-centric questions, become very complex data-wise, technologically, regulatory-wise. It's hard to just carve out a single piece of the value chain.
Yeah. From a industry overall, have you seen any improvements in response to COVID as an industry that are offering greater opportunities for life insurance to evolve?
Can you say that again, Michael? Apologies.
Yeah, I want to drive at, so as an industry, so we've talked a lot about how Haven Life has maneuvered their way through a COVID, hopefully soon to be post-COVID world.
Yeah.
And very curious as an industry, what are some of the potential industry changes that are allowing companies like Haven Life or others to maybe maneuver more effectively and set goals to strive for change that may not have even been available prior to these more industry-driven, updates?
Got it. Yeah, I guess I would say that I do think the industry as a whole, because of COVID, is taking the idea of just technology more seriously in terms of how everything needs to change. So I think, people sitting at home being able to do virtual sessions with advisors being able to, have an omni-channel experience, talked about for a long time, but I think not necessarily actually done until more recently. I think that's definitely one outcome that you're seeing from COVID. I also think that there's kind of a realization that kind of more broadly thinking through partnerships and ecosystems is important for the industry. So in a world where the financial relationships that customers have are really kind of across the board, and with their banks, their brokerages of different sizes, different types, I think the industry is thinking more and more about how it can sort of create partnerships to more naturally create touch points for customers to be able to interact with its products. And I think, in some ways, kind of COVID has helped that as well, just because you see, again, I think the sort of desire to think about reaching customers in different ways in moments where all patterns and old customer behaviors were changing.
Yeah. The insurance industry is naturally a very competitive one. However, I've been a big believer that the rapid nature of the current digital transformation that we're seeing and experiencing, whether from a customer or from a business point of view, is in large part being driven not only by the dollars that are being invested, but particularly by the partnerships. And the leaders oftentimes coming from outside the industry, trying to solve industry-driven problems that all participants in life insurance, P&C, and health can at least transparently see and compete with, or potentially participate in utilizing. So certain technologies that everyone has access to, or things like that. It's interesting to see how the partnership element in insurance is developing and helping technology providers or companies grow in a way that it seemed like there was more isolation back in the day. And now things are being attacked as an industry in a complementary way. And that to me is in large part a good reason why the transformation is more real today than it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah. What kind of partners are you, or types of partners, Michael, are you seeing that you think are kind of getting traction and are sort of adding value?
The one that stands out that I think we all see on a weekly or monthly basis, without calling out specific companies, is you'll see multiple insurance carriers or reinsurers investing in the same technology company. And just that alone demonstrates a level of partnership that I don't think was there 20 or so years ago. And then you have service providers in particular that multiple carriers may potentially use that are solving a problem that previously each individual client or carrier would be trying to solve on their own. Naturally, if everyone is working together towards one direction and supporting that direction, you can accomplish a lot more than if you're trying to all recreate the wheel at the same time.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
But I want to stay on the topic of where Haven Life sees themselves kind of blazing a trail in life insurance. Where do you see the company going from here?
Yeah, so I think we really are going to kind of continue down the path that we're on. And I think that's going to mean a few different things for us. Number one is we want to continue to expand the ways in which that we serve our existing customers. So if you think of that very technology savvy, digitally enabled, younger family customer, we want to really be able to offer not just kind of term protection, but other types of protection to that customer. And so you'll see us kind of thinking more broadly about products and value that we can offer that customer in that way. That's kind of one big thing. The other big thing that we are going to continue to do is really look at that sort of ecosystem sort of approach and think about how we can continue to simplify our products and embed them more and more in different kinds of customer journeys, working with partners and others where it makes sense. And so I think that's one thing that we're really excited about moving forward. We've got a lot of partners that we're working with already and kind of are expanding that out over time.
Excellent. I'm looking at a number of great questions. Please continue to, audience, please continue to submit them using the Q&A box. Everyone seems to be doing a really good job of identifying that feature on Zoom, so please keep using it. I want to focus in, Yaron, on some of these questions. I think after scanning them, everyone really wants to continue to get to know Haven Life at a deeper level. So I will dive in here. The first one that I want to come back to or want to hit has us coming back to a topic. Can you reiterate for the audience the relationship between Mass Mutual and Haven Life? How do you define that role between the two companies?
Yep. So Haven Life is really a wholly owned subsidiary of Mass Mutual. And we are a life insurance agency that is effectively distributing Mass Mutual products. But what that means is we really work closely with everyone at the home office on kind of developing the Haven Life direct-to-consumer solution that you kind of see at havenlife.com. That's a very, very close and positive relationship for us. It also means all the policies that we sell through or that are sold through Haven Life Insurance Agency are Mass Mutual policies at the end of the day.
Gotcha. And from a sales standpoint, is there, how are you complementary to any sort of field agent that might be selling Mass Mutual direct? How does Haven Life fit into the distribution model?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We really look at ourselves as serving a different customer with a different product set than like a traditional distribution channel, if you will. So we're really focused on term life insurance that is kind of bread and butter, probably sort of lower margin than some of the other cash value products. So we're solving the kind of how do we get a simple product to a customer that is more technology oriented than your typical sort of traditional customer, if you will. So that's how we look at kind of the sort of channel piece for us. And relative to the others, I think there's still, especially when you look at, cash value products, really much more complex products. Those aren't things that we are focused on at Haven Life. Those are things that are really sort of, require often more advice, more input, much more hand-holding. And we think the advisor channels are really good at selling those kinds of products.
And from a marketing standpoint, what are some of the effective strategies for reaching this audience that Haven Life is targeting?
Yeah, so we do a lot of what I will call kind of the basics of digital marketing acquisition, which takes a lot of time to do well and a lot of data to optimize over time. So we do a ton of content and kind of blog outreach. We do a lot of social media sort of acquisition, paid and otherwise. We also do some direct response television marketing, and we bring all of those together and we kind of use a lot of pretty sophisticated kind of data science algorithms and things to kind of help drive the customer journey and optimize that over time. So that's, and kind of having been in this business now for 6 years, we have a pretty good picture of what kind of customers our offering resonates with. And so that's something we look at really practically in real time to get sort of feedback on, how is our marketing program doing and where do we need to make changes?
Some of the audience is curious about how competitive the growth is of these new digitally enabled life insurance opportunities for consumers. So just talking very high level, how do you see the marketplace growing from a consumer's point of view?
Yeah. So there's, when I started this 6 years ago, we were kind of the only game in town, if you will. with the sort of direct term life insurance offering. There's definitely a few now. And I think, each one has a slightly different approach or solution. But I think if you think about it from a customer perspective, one of the challenges is that we really all, I think, really over focus on first time life insurance buyers, right? That's kind of the core demographic. And the reality is first time life insurance buyers don't exactly know what the entire process is. And they're only going to be buying this a few times in their life, right? So there definitely is a challenge in terms of how do you sort of differentiate in the current sort of space around your offering, and the competitive landscape in general, I would say, has gotten tougher. It's gotten tougher not just from a sort of differentiation standpoint, but even in kind of the marketing channels where we acquire customers. The price keeps going up because there's more and more bidders for those types of customers. So where we really focus on kind of having a sort of different approach is I would say in two areas. Number one, in building sort of a brand that is known for kind of wonderful customer experiences, customer service, and really sort of leaning into that, which I think you can kind of see when you go to havenlife.com, how important that is. One of the things that we've, as an example, have done there to differentiate and to help build that brand halo is something we call Haven Life Plus, which is a service that our Haven term policyholders get, where they get to have things like an online will, an online sort of digital archive of documents, discounts at CVS Minute Click, a whole suite of value-added services that they can sort of take advantage of when they become a Haven term policyholder. That's one way we think about brand. The second way we really think about differentiating strategically is in how we sort of bring customers in and through our process. So we really believe we're kind of the best in the game, if you will. And I hope that doesn't sound unhumble, but in terms of bringing customers in and giving them a truly end-to-end digital experience that even if they have to go through full underwriting, even if they want to talk to a person, no matter what their journey is, we're going to kind of help them along the way and sort of give them a great experience. And so that ultimately leads to not only happy customers, but also better conversion rates along the way. And we think we're kind of ahead of the game in that journey.
Yeah, no, I think that the competitiveness that you're sharing is very much part of why you're successful and why you're building customer experience, both at the forefront of buying, but also and likely more importantly, at the back end of actually becoming a client. It demonstrates the value that you are constantly trying to strive for. So I applaud that competitiveness, and it drives, I know, you and your company to build things for clients that don't exist. So no need to be humble. It's important that these competitive opportunities are there to build a better industry, build better products for customers. I am curious, a question about the demographic kind of segment that you're targeting. You've talked a lot about it, but is there any kind of median shift in terms of that new buyer that you've seen? Who was that buyer, say, a year or two ago, and where do you think that buyer is now in terms of age, or other any sort of demographic elements that you can point to that maybe you can't say a specific number? I know that can be tough on the spot, but where do you see the shift as an individual profile changing?
Yeah. So look, I can tell you, since we started, it hasn't actually shifted all that dramatically, I will say. It tends to be, without giving you exact numbers, like mid to late 30s policy insured. It tends to be a middle to upper middle income person. It's pretty geographically dispersed, I would say. And those are things that we have seen, they tend to have between 1 and 2 kids. And it's sort of slightly more, I guess, weighted toward men than women, at least in our sort of policyholder base. I think the things where I'm starting to see it shift a little bit is we're actually seeing kind of the average face amounts come down a little bit, and a little bit of a shift actually now more towards women over time as well. And that I attribute more to our sort of acquisition strategy, right? So that's kind of more um, an outgrowth of how we've now chosen to partner with different kinds of folks who are helping us reach a different kind of a demographic in different ways. But I also think you're seeing, if you look at the landscape, different players, even digital players who look like us, may be taking different paths on that, right? Some folks are going to be more interested in how do we increase kind of average premiums, and so they're going more toward maybe the more traditional, slightly higher net worth customer, and other folks are more sort of thinking about how do we reach broader audiences, which will take you down a different path.
Mm-hmm. A question that resonated with me, I'd actually set it aside as something I wanted to hear your response on as well, was how you're balancing. You've talked a lot about kind of point of sale improvements in experience, the management of the policy, but talk us through some of the ways in which you're using technology or reapproaching the strategy around claims as well, and the experience of the beneficiaries potentially of life insurance.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. So it's one of those things that is tricky to, especially as you're kind of growing a new business, to prioritize, right? Because quite frankly, just the number of claims that you get is so small relative to the number of policyholders that you're serving. So this tends not to be the big sort of emphasis. At the same time, the promise that we make as a life insurance agency or insurer, or whatever it is that in that moment we will be there and there for you. And so a couple things I will say on this: we are actually investing. It's not where we started, but we're definitely investing now in that claims journey and sort of bringing the same type of digital technology to the beneficiary journey than we did to the policyholder journey. One thing I will say, however, is in that moment, more than ever and more than any other part of the life insurance journey, I think having that human touch and having that like really just, I guess, white glove experience that is sympathetic and empathetic is hugely important. And thankfully, because we're a part of MassMutual, we're sort of able to leverage a lot of their kind of claims servicing, which is fantastic and sort of leads to a good experience for our customers.
There is a question relevant on that topic. If a customer called in for a claim, are they talking to Haven Life? And do you have a claims team, or are they talking to MassMutual?
Yeah, so often they'll come to the Haven Life agency customer service first, but ultimately it's since it is a MassMutual policy, it's MassMutual claims that they're dealing with. But we'll certainly, as the agency, kind of help them along and stay in touch in that process as we go.
A couple of questions about MassMutual's ongoing acquisition of other InsurTech companies. Are there any sibling companies or acquisitions that you're able to talk about in terms of their complementary effect on what MassMutual is doing and how that might improve Haven Life's opportunity to grow and improve their own experience with clients and customers?
Yeah, so I'm probably not the expert to talk to about all the various things MassMutual is doing, but I will say this: I do think, certainly from a Haven Life perspective, I think MassMutual more broadly has been really sort of forward thinking about how technology is changing the industry and making really smart investments. I think Haven Life obviously is one of them. They recently announced the acquisition of Blueprint Income. So I think there's kind of just a broad recognition and a strategy about how sort of digital is really changing and has the potential to even more dramatically in the future change the business across the board. And so, and by the way, I think that's also even in the traditional channels where the agency business, which is and will continue to be a very critical part of it, is also sort of thinking about how digital sort of interactions with customers can continue to grow that business as well.
In terms of, this is a step back to the conversation about demographics in terms of the different audience types that are out there, there's a bit of at least a conceptual divide in terms of the older generation versus the newer generation. Do you see Haven Life addressing the experience in any particular way around, say, an older customer versus a younger customer? Where's the balance in terms of your policyholders and your focus going back to demographics, and whether you see a potential split in between that at least relates to this concept of there being kind of a newer generation of buyers versus an older generation of buyers, and a clear semblance of how you should address either audience?
Yeah. So the way we look at things is really ultimately with Haven Life, we believe we can sort of be good at taking products, making them simple, and delivering them with fantastic technology and customer experience. And so where we think there's a business opportunity to do that, in our channels, we'll actually look to do that. So one example is something called Age Up, which was a product that we kind of launched outside of the Haven Life brand because it was looking at a different customer that was slightly older, which was a longevity annuity. The customer was very different, but if you think about that same hypothesis that I articulated, which is market opportunity that's interesting, where sort of technology could be enabled and product simplification could sort of make a difference to solve the market problem in a real way, I think that's where we're kind of ultimately interested in going. And so that may, in some cases, like Age Up, take us to slightly different customer sets.
Interesting. There's a question about, in terms of growth, how many policyholders you have, but let's stay focused maybe on the questions on the areas that maybe you can address. The reach of Haven Life is nationwide. How long has it been a nationwide distributed product? And are there any other sort of growth metrics that you might be able to share with the audience?
Yeah, so it took us about, I don't know, from the day we launched in one state to getting national took probably a little bit more than 2 years, I think, to get national. And then the sort of growth in terms of policyholders and volumes has kind of been steady since then. We don't share those numbers publicly, so I appreciate the effort and the questions, but I won't share them here either, but I'm happy to share. I mean, I think I shared already, like this year, we're up between 60 and 70% over last year. The previous year, we were up between 30 and 40% over the year before that. And we are, very happy with the numbers and the growth that we're seeing, and believe we are a good high volume seller of term products at this point.
I think that one of the areas that you have achieved some tremendous successes in terms of your NPS score, your Net Promoter Score. In February and through May, I think, of 2020, you achieved a score that was nearly unheard of in the life insurance industry. Can you share that number and that I've alluded a lot to? And if at least in general, what has led to that type of success from a customer experience and kind of measurement point of view?
Yeah, no. So we look at NPS and take it very seriously. I think most recently we have tended to be around the 70 mark or so, and I think in the last quarter or two, it's been higher than ever. The things that sort of lead to that customer NPS, I think, is a combination historically of our technology, our customer service, that human touch point, our brand and how it feels. I think what has led in my hypothesis to what has led to kind of our best yet numbers more recently is how we handled things during the pandemic, honestly, and how we brought customers in. I think you saw, first of all, us leaning into our mission, really bending over backwards to help people get across the line in a difficult moment with their life insurance policy. You saw us communicating really transparently through our blog posts. And you saw us really leaning into that mission of like, just how do we make life less hard for our customers? One of the things that I like to talk about, since you're giving me the opportunity, I will, is this annual report that we do where, I think a lot of life insurers are talking about how do we sort of like engage more with customers? How do we get better relationships? In our view has been, you know what, there's a lot of things that aren't all that fancy that we can do to improve on that. And our annual report is one great example where once a year, we go out to our policyholders, we survey them, we just ask them what's been going on in their life. And from that, we create something that our amazingly talented brand team here does. And this year, it resulted in what we call the Haven Life Family Cookbook. Because what we found was during the pandemic, so many people were talking about food, how it became this source of comfort for them in this hard time. Everybody was like at home baking something from their culture or something that they love to eat. And so what we did was we created a cookbook and we sent it out to all our policyholders. And people just loved it, right? People just wrote us and thanked us. And it's just those little things that aren't just a matter of like giving something away, but it's a matter of like, how did you sort of think about it in a way that resonates with your customer, that in this moment became that much more meaningful, and I think helped us get those results.
Yeah, it's a subtle case study for how you take the digital transformation, the digitization of the data that you have, and do something valuable with it that has nothing to do with the underlying product that people came to you to buy. And there you are creating added value through this additional touch point. It's fantastic. It's just one example of what you guys are doing, which is great. There's a good question about, and we've touched on this broadly, but are there any other kind of key performance indexes or measurements that your team relies on in order to determine the customer experience the state of, and where you're driving at improving that experience? What are some of the measurements that you guys really key in on, either through customer survey or customer interaction that you're able to track through analytics? Anything you can share about the actual metrics that you pay most attention to?
Yeah, so beyond, I would say, the obvious things like sales volumes and NPS scores, we really look a lot at our sort of costs. So cost per acquisition is a key driver for us that we're constantly optimizing for, which leads you to also look at conversion rates really closely. So we want to make sure that we're acquiring customers profitably and sort of turning on. We're always trying new marketing programs every day, so we look at that number very, very, very closely, really on a daily or weekly basis. I think one of the challenges that one has in the life space is that even with our product set, it can take you a week or 2 weeks on average to actually know if a customer is converting or not. So in a world of digital marketing where you could turn something on and you don't want to wait 2 weeks to know if your marketing program is working or not. So part of the secret sauce that we have is we look at metrics to know along the way, are we being successful or not, even before we know if a policy is placed or not.
Mm-hmm. Yaron, with about 5 minutes left, I want to make sure to give you an opportunity. If you have particular closing thoughts, anything about Haven Life that you want to make sure to stress and share, I want to give you the floor before we start to close out.
I think the big thing for me is, first off, it's an exciting time to be part of this industry. There's a lot going on that's exciting. And I think even more than that, one of the things that the pandemic has really shown me is that the value of the products we as an industry sell, just that sense of stability, that sense of protection, is more desired, more needed now than any time, certainly in recent memory. And so I think you kind of combine that still basic need that exists with all of the talk that Michael, been talking about around changes in data technology and all of these things. It's just it's a wonderful time to be thinking about how we can serve our customers better. And, I think as an industry, the more people that are doing that, the more we're going to kind of train our customers about that value proposition and bring people along in a way that everyone benefits.
Yeah, excellent. I'm excited, Yaron. I know that we're both, InsurTech Ohio and Haven Life are both partnered on the upcoming Reuters events, Future of Insurance 2021 USA. Again, that'll be June 22nd through the 24th. I highly encourage our audience to sign up for that. Yaron, I believe you'll be speaking at that event as well.
I believe so. Yes. Yep.
Yes, I think that's true. I look forward to joining that session as well as many others. And hopefully you and I will have an opportunity in the future to continue this conversation. It's been a privilege chatting with you. I want to thank our audience for joining, and Yaron. This has been an excellent conversation. Very much appreciate your time.
No, thank you. Thanks, Michael. Thanks to InsurTech Ohio and to Reuters. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for moderating here and for just great insightful questions.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again to our audience, and look forward to future Reuters events.